there, spooky friends. Welcome to a sneak preview of an upcoming podcast that we're going to do called Scene Missing. Sorry, there's not going to be a normal topic episode this week. We had a funeral it was yesterday if you're listening to this on Tuesday. So
literally the day we record wound up being a day where we were with family and at a funeral. So we decided that we'd either not have an episode or we'd pull this thing that we've had sitting around for a little while now out and dust it off. We've talked about using it as Patreon content as a sneak preview. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to release this episode to all of you folks so you can listen to it, and then we will release 2 more episodes for patrons that you guys can listen to and get a little sneak peek of stuff that's coming up. Yeah, so we're going to have 2 more episodes of this new podcast, Scene Missing, which is our movie podcast, up on Patreon in the next couple weeks. And so stay tuned for that. But for everyone that's been loyal supporters of us, we wanted to make sure you had something to listen to. You know, it may not be everyone's jam, but I'm really proud of it. I think we did pretty good work on it. And this is kind of funny because we recorded this pilot episode 2 years ago, a little bit under 2 years ago. So when we recorded it, the pilot had a different name at the time, and there's some like pop culture references in there that are not timely anymore. And there's no speak of COVID. So if you're looking for a break from COVID or politics,
this will be it for you.
This is a pretty good. This is like a blast from 2018. So before we get going, just a quick programming note: we typically have our Storytime episodes on Tuesdays when we record them live. We're going to be recording Wednesday. We're going to be recording this Wednesday, the 19th, live instead of Tuesday, the 18th. The episode will still release normally on Friday, so for those of you who don't watch us live, no big deal. For those of you who do, it is getting bumped, and we will make notes of that in our social media as well. So we're going to go ahead and get this sneak preview started, so we hope you enjoy. Hello there, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Scene Missing podcast. My name is Adam. I'm going to be your host, and with me is my co-host, Robin Grace. Hello, Robin.
Hello.
So, Robin and I actually have another podcast. It's a paranormal podcast called Scary-ish. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and we just investigate things.
It's paranormal-ish.
It's paranormal-ish.
Because I do cults and stuff, too.
Yeah, well, we have known each other for a long time, Robin and I, and there's a thing that happens very often, and I think it happens to a lot of people out there, where when you're talking to your significant other or friends, and they're bringing up a TV show or a movie, something that you haven't seen before, and you mention like, oh, I've never seen that, they act like it's just this sin that you've committed, like the greatest crime in the world. And Robin and I had the greatest crime. Robin and I had a roommate before, and her and Robin have seen almost all the same thing. So if I brought up like, oh, I've never seen that, they'd always yell at me like, you've never seen that?
Well, I think it's also the age difference.
It's not that big of an age gap.
Well, no, we're the same age, and
it's like four years of an age gap between Robin and I. And so there's a lot of stuff that I've seen that she hasn't, and vice versa. And the amount of time that we've known each other, we've introduced each other to certain things. And then afterwards, almost always, we just talk shit about whatever we just watched to make the other person, like, pissed off, basically. So we just decided, like, let's start a movie podcast where we can share these things with each other, and then we can actually record afterwards and get impressions. And there's stuff that Robin has never wanted to watch before, and that I didn't want to watch before, and now we're going to force each other to watch those things. And my favorite thing about the premise of this podcast is it's not another bad movie podcast. We get to do good movies. We get to do like critically acclaimed movies. We get to do whatever
movies we want.
Exactly.
It doesn't, I mean,
it just has
I'm going to make you watch things that aren't critically acclaimed, just saying.
I mean, I am too. Like, our lists are pretty long of things that we've seen that the other person hasn't, that we've at least enjoyed or would bear watching one more time to put the person through it. So the breakdown of the show is that we're going to go ahead and go through the entire movie. We're not going to stop on everything but the pertinent things, and because this is a long movie, we'll go through as much as we can. We're going to go through it, give our reactions to it, especially for Robin, because it was her first time watching it, and when we're done, we're going to rate it. And when I rate things, I typically do it on a scale scale of 1 to 10, but I allow for 0.5, so it's like...
Okay.
And we'll do this every episode so we can get individual ratings and things like that. And then after we do that, we'll go over some movie history or trivia that we haven't covered. It's going to be really fun. And for the episode 0, this is the pilot episode, I decided that I was going to choose a movie, and I chose a very famous movie. It's very well known. And I chose Goodfellas.
I'd never heard of it.
She's never heard of it. She's never seen it. So I was like, let's sit down and watch Goodfellas. I've tried to get her to watch Goodfellas before, and she's never been interested in it. So
they
I'm like...
were a whole bunch of Goodfellas.
I hate you so much. But I was like, just put away your phone, put away your Kindle. Let's sit here. We'll make some popcorn. We're actually going to watch this movie start to finish. And that's exactly what we did. So for those of you who don't know, Goodfellas is a mob flick made by Martin Scorsese, and it came out, I believe, in 1990. So this is going to be really fun because this is an older movie, and I really want to get Robin's take on like what it was. So what were you expecting of this movie going into it based off of what you were told?
Everybody was like gangsters.
That's what you were expecting of the movie?
I was thinking it was going to be more like Untouchables, but it wasn't. So, I mean...
I haven't seen Untouchables in a while, so that's a fun one. And we're going to have certain episodes where we're going to go and watch movies that, like, we haven't seen in forever, and, like, we can't remember, but one person absolutely loves that movie. Like, Untouchables might make its way onto the show, but... so you were just expecting it to be like Untouchables. You didn't have any other expectations? I know a couple friends that we told we were doing this said, like, get ready to see, like, every mob cliche ever.
Yeah, and I honestly have not seen a lot of mob movies, so...
It's really not her genre.
Yeah, no. I'm a big anime nerd, so this is different for me.
It's kind of funny, too, because as we were talking about, like, should we do this movie podcast? Should we do it weekly or bi-weekly? We're going to be a weekly show, by the way. One of the things that you always worry about is running out of material, and we talked about how if we ever run out of material, because we have a list that's like 100 movies deep at this point, if we ever run out of material, we could switch to television, and there's a lot of things that I haven't seen and that Robin hasn't seen that are really critically acclaimed shows or just well-liked shows. Like, I have never seen Friends. I think it's a ridiculous show, and I don't want to watch it. And there's so many seasons of it, so I know at some point when we run out of stuff, Robin's going to be like, okay, this next, like, season of the show, we're going to watch Friends. And then I'm going to force her to watch Breaking Bad, because she's never seen it either.
Ugh.
So there's a lot of things that we don't overlap with, and I'm really excited to get to it. So this episode, we're going to be covering Goodfellas. And it's kind of fun because we've both seen this movie now, and we have put up the premise where it's like, we are going to talk about this movie and go over it and give reactions to it, and I really want to know what Robin thought of some of these scenes, because if you've ever seen Goodfellas, you know it's an intense movie. And if you haven't, the rest of this podcast is basically going to be a spoiler cast, so if you don't mind it being spoiled for you, please listen. And if you have seen it, then this should be really fun, because you can hear Robin's, like, visceral reaction to the first time watching Goodfellas. So I'm excited about it, and we're just going to jump right into it. So I guess it's called spoiler time. That's what I wrote on my whiteboard for what we're going to do when we go over the entire movie. So Goodfellas opens up with the character Henry Hill driving in the car with his two friends, Jimmy Conway and Joe Pesci.
Is he related to Hank Hill?
No.
Sells propane.
I like that you didn't notice that I called Joe Pesci and not by his character name of Tommy, because he's just Joe Pesci to me. But they're driving down the road, and they hear something in the trunk of the car, and they have to stop and check it. And Robin was just like, how do they not know what's in the trunk of the car? Like, how do you not know what's in your trunk? And I was like, oh, they know. They know exactly what that is. And then they pop the trunk, and you see a bloodied gangster. And Robin, what happens after that?
I seriously, the first 5 minutes of this movie, I sat there like, what am I watching? Because
her mouth was wide open.
Because it was so brutal and so absolutely unnecessary. I was just like, am I really gonna have to, what?
Yeah, and after watching that scene, I turned and looked at Robin, and her mouth was just, like, on the floor. And I was just so pleased. Like, yeah, this is really going to set the tone of this movie, because they open the trunk, they find a gangster who they've brutalized already, who's still alive. And then he gets stabbed like 15 times with a butcher knife, and then shot.
It wasn't a butcher knife. It was just a regular kitchen knife.
That's right.
You find out later on in the movie.
Where he got it from. So it's after that it takes a step back, and it starts out with one of the lines that I remember most from movies, and I know it's been voted on a bunch of lists, and I could tell you the ranking that it's been on a different list, but like no one knows all these sites that do it, and nothing's super official, but it's the line, as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a gangster.
Man, it feels good to be a gangster.
I knew you were going to do that joke. I really did. And, of course, then it cuts back to Henry Hill as a young man. I think he says he's like 11 at the time. And it goes through...
You gotta put out, too, that this is supposed to be based on a real...
It's not supposed to be. This is straight up based on a real human being and a true story. They changed some of the surnames, they changed some of the last names, but most of it has ties to, like, actual real-life people. Like, Jimmy Conway's real name was Jimmy Burke, but Jimmy Burke was actually born James Conway, and he changed his name to James Burke. So these characters' names are pretty close to what they actually were. They're not just approximations.
And they existed in the 1970s.
They existed across...
Not a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, this movie technically starts out in 1955, and it spans all the way up until the 1980s. But you see Henry as a kid, and he just, in general, starting out, has this sort of contempt for day-to-day life. And the way he describes the things that people do in their day-to-day life, like pay bills, work to collect money, he just thinks everyone is a joke. He thinks it's like a life of a prisoner, basically, and he doesn't want it. So the movie starts out with him just not going to school, going across the street, and helping out these guys who run a store that are part of the mob, basically. And he loves every single second of it. And it's this montage of all this stuff that he's going through. It's like a coming-of-age montage.
Montage!
It shows how he just rejects the conventional thinking of what like a life is supposed to be. And his father's kind of a hard ass, and his father doesn't appreciate that because eventually a letter gets sent to Henry's house that says he hasn't been at school in months, and his dad brutally beats the shit out of him because of it. And Henry says that he figures sometimes you have to take a beating. Better. I hate you so much. Different movie. But he has to take this beating, and then he goes and he tells his friends in the mob, like, hey, I can't keep coming over here because he's all fucked up because he got beat up by his dad. And, Rob, what happens next?
I feel just so bad for this postman. Like, they just beat the crap out of their mailman, and I just felt so bad. But they never got mail after that, and I thought it was super cute. It's like their mom literally had to go to the post office to complain that they weren't getting
rather than
mail.
Go and deal with anyone at the school, they just decided to go harass the mailman. And by harass, I mean, like, beat the shit out of him, threaten to stick in the oven if any letters from the school go to the kid's house again. And it's just a nice way of showing you how they're going to deal with stuff throughout the movie.
But how do you not realize your kid isn't going to school?
I mean, they leave the house, and then you don't see them until the time they're supposed to get home.
You don't check if your kid's doing their homework, or... I mean, where...
I mean, he did say that his dad worked constantly, so I guess we can put that on the mom a little bit, but I don't know. They probably just trusted him, and then he violated that trust.
And then they never worry about him graduating high school?
Or he probably didn't make it past middle school at that point. Like,
no, wasn't he in high school?
I think he was 11. No, high school he would have been much older. Yeah, so he just said fuck it to like the normal life and decided he was going to be a gangster. There's even a scene where he's young and he wears a suit for the first time around his mom and gets like super shiny shoes. And tells his mom, like, hey, Mom, look at my shoes. And she tells him flat out, like...
You look like a gangster.
You look like a gangster. And that's exactly what he wants to look like.
And back in the day, gangster wasn't like gangster now.
It's a different type of gangster. Time. Yeah. It moves on to kind of explain the people that he's going to have in his life. And it gives you an idea of, hey... This is what the mob really is. And he even says that, like, what Paulie does, what the boss does is provide protection for people who can't go to the police. And he calls it basically a police department for wise guys, which is kind of his way of normalizing things. And you really realize as the movie goes on that he's normalized it in the sense that he's a narrator and he's telling you, like, all these people are good people and it's just a normal thing to do. And then as time goes on, you're like, well, that's not normal. But it's still very, very fun because you get to see this through, like, a child's, like, enthusiasm. And it's funny because he gives you this voiceover that's always reinforcing stuff. And then there's a scene that shows you that Henry actually has a heart. As a kid, he sees his first person shot. And the guy just runs up and he falls down the steps of the business that's like a front for the mob or whatever that he hangs out at. And he wraps a bunch of like towels around his hand to like help him. And the guy who's running the place...
It was a bunch of aprons.
Aprons,
and
whatever.
And afterwards, he's like, you wasted 8 aprons on that dude.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck?
And he's upset because, like, whether or not they were involved in that crime, like, the police were gonna come to where this guy is because there's a bleeding guy on the steps. So he's like, he can't have that there. And he tells Henry that he needs to toughen up. And it's something that he really takes to heart. And then you get introduced to Jimmy Conway. And Jimmy Conway is played by Robert De Niro. And this is just such a perfect role for Robert De Niro, especially like late 80s, early 90s when like everyone wanted mob movies, even though they had been coming out like regularly. And you introduce him, and there's a lot of trivia regarding this, and we're going to get to trivia after the movie, and we'll go over some stuff once we've cleared the plot, basically. And it's just this really charming dude who everyone's also really, really afraid of. And he just hands out money when he walks into a place, like, to literally everyone. He says that the doorman got $100 for opening the door. And you can't help but feel like, I kind of understand why people would want to be around these people. Like, just opening a door and you're going to get paid a lot of money. As long as you're not opening the door for Tommy, for Joe Pesci's character. But then if you make
a mistake, you're going to get murdered.
Exactly. So we get introduced to Jimmy, and everything just is peachy. Like, you're seeing just the bright side of this, and it's like the honeymoon phase for Henry. And then, of course, he finally gets introduced to Mini Joe Pesci, and they became friends, and they start selling cigarettes, like cartons of cigarettes at like what seems to be a factory. And, of course, the thing happens that's normally going to happen to anyone involved in organized crime. Henry gets arrested. He gets arrested for the first time, and it's for selling cigarettes.
He gets, quote-unquote, pinched.
Exactly. He takes his first pinch. And he's afraid that people are going to be mad at him for it. And Jimmy sees him as he's walking out of the courtroom, and he puts a giant wad of cash in his pocket, and he tells him it's a graduation present. And he says that he finally has moved forward, and he tells him he's learned the 2 biggest lessons you're going to need to know in life.
Which are
never rat on your friends,
and always keep your mouth shut.
I
was just like, what the fudge?
I remember seeing this when I was younger and thinking, that's probably a good lesson to know.
In life.
And hearing from people before, never talk to the cops. And I've had this line in my head since I saw this, and I'm 33, about to be 34. So I was born in 1985. So this movie came out when I was 5 years old, okay? And my parents were the type of parents where it's we think we've reinforced the boundaries of reality enough where we can show our kids PG-13 rated R movies at a very young age. So I remember watching this movie probably before I was 10 years old. So I didn't see it right when it came out, but I was blessed with parents that were if we watch it with you and you have any questions, you can talk to us. Also, don't say the bad words. So I watched this movie at a very young age, and it was, I wouldn't say formative, obviously, because I'm not a gangster. I'm doing a podcast, which is the perfect front, by the way. Not really.
No, it's not.
Because you have no money to launder. But I remember watching this movie and thinking, loyalty to friends is incredibly important. And I understand where they're all coming from when it comes to that. And, of course, they walk out of the courtroom and, everyone that you've been introduced to, all these characters are waiting for him in, the lobby of the courtroom to, celebrate the fact that he got arrested for the first time. And I think Robin's exact words were, what the fuck? She couldn't believe what she was seeing. And it's they're proud of him. He's moving forward. He's finally becoming one of them. So what did you think at this point in the movie, Robin?
I just was mind blown at how this little kid, you never figure out what happens to his family, for one.
You see his younger brother at one point in the movie.
Way later in the movie.
Way later, and you see his parents again during the wedding ceremony,
and
which we'll get to.
But so his parents are just okay, he got arrested, whatever. Everything's fine.
I think they basically cut ties with him, or they got to the point where they're there's nothing we can do to discipline him. They knew who he was at that point. You know what I mean?
But they lived across the street. They literally lived across the street from this place. So how do they not do anything?
Well, that's the thing. They were also reaping the benefits of this. In the scene where he blows up the cars, just to show that he's blowing up cars at a young age.
He's
11.
Some kids carried groceries for my mother all the way home.
And he says, you know why they did it? It was out of respect.
Yeah.
So it's the family has this notion in their head that what he's doing is wrong, but it's clear they're also reaping some of the benefits. And on top of that, this is an 11-year-old kid that was making more money than most of the adults in the neighborhood. He says that at one point in the voiceover. So I imagine he would give some of that money to his family. He seemed fairly responsible for a gangster. But at this point, we cut forward in the movie to years later, 1963, and we see young Ray Liotta. And at some point, he mentions the fact that he was 21 at the year 1963, and
he looks like crap. The girl he meets, Karen, she's the one that was he's this rich 21-year-old
with all these connections.
Yeah, he's oh my goodness. I was just no, Ray Liotta looks like he's 30-something in this scene.
Well, in fact, Ray 21. Liotta, when they started shooting the movie, was 35 years old, so that probably has something to do with the reason that he looked
I was just are you kidding me? This is...
They didn't have the de-aging technology they have for Samuel L. Jackson and Captain Marvel, which if you haven't seen yet,
he looks so young in that movie.
He looks very young. It looks very natural, but when he starts to run, I'm nope, he's old. He looks like an old man running in a young man's body. But they didn't have that technology back during Goodfellas. So they fast forward, they show you this, and he tells the audience that at this point in his life, what he's realized is people that don't do what mobsters do and gangsters do just don't have any balls. They live their life with no balls whatsoever, because if they do the regular 9-to-5 bullshit, as he puts it, they're just basically cowards, which basically tells the whole audience, You fucking suck. You should be more like me.
All I remember, like the line that I'll always remember, because they repeated it like 50 million times, is fuck you, pay me.
Fuck you, pay me. That's a really good segment where they explain how they exploit people and how like people come to them for help that they still exploit them, even though they just got done telling you they're the good guys.
Yeah.
So, okay. The movie starts out at this point with... I hate you. With a young Ray Liotta and Joe Pesci, and they are planning a robbery for Air France. There's money coming in, and it's something really simple. They're just going to walk in and pick up some bags and walk out and take hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then they talk to you about tribute, how you're going to have to kick money up to the boss of the crew that you're part of to make sure that he's happy. And they tell him, like, hey, if anyone asks you where you got all that money, tell them you got it in Vegas playing craps. Which wouldn't exactly work anymore, but Vegas is a really good place to launder money. I mean, that's where we're based out of. So, I mean, we launder all of our dirty money
just
there.
Shut up. Don't stop talking.
But this moves on into a scene where it's pretty iconic, and it's the "you're a funny guy" scene. And Joe Pesci's telling a story, and it's ridiculously over the top, and Robin's looking at me, and she literally goes, "He's not funny." And I was like, oh, just wait, just keep watching. Because Ray Liotta's laughing, and Ray Liotta tells him, like, you're a funny guy. And it's this scene where he takes it the absolute wrong way. And he starts threatening him and challenging him on, like, how am I funny? I'm like, I'm here to fucking amuse you.
Is it my voice? My voice? Is that why I'm funny?
You sound nothing like Joe Pesci.
I don't fucking care.
That was like Southern Joe Pesci missing half a tongue. I don't know if he'd make that noise if he was missing half a tongue. It'd be more like a slapping noise. But... he's fucking with him. He's just busting his balls to see if he gets scared, and he tells him you may fold under questioning, which is just some obvious foreshadowing of things that are to come in the movie. But what's really interesting, and I said we were going to do trivia at the end of this, that I'm going to stop and pause right now. The trivia is that Joe Pesci worked as a busboy or a waiter, I'm not exactly sure which, and he had an actual mobster come to his restaurant when he was young, and the guy was very charming and very friendly and very funny, and he told him, you're very funny. And the guy got super, super offended. And that scene is essentially what happened to Joe Pesci in real life.
Wow.
When he tried to tell a mobster he was funny, except for the part where he tells him he's kidding at the end. And he told Martin Scorsese that before they started filming. And Scorsese's like, just do it. Like, put it in the movie. And it's also interesting because a lot of the stuff that's in the movie, a lot of the dialogue is like ad-libbed. They had like premises and they did have a script, but when they rehearsed stuff, like Martin Scorsese said, like, just say whatever you want. Like, stick to the theme, like, stick to what we have to get done in this scene.
Like, know your character, be your character.
Exactly.
Just say anything.
And when you watch a movie like this one, especially like Goodfellas, it does not seem like unscripted dialogue. It definitely seems like lines that they had to prepare, but like they just all lived in their characters so well that it all comes off as like very authentic, you know? So this is the first example of a scene that's like ad-lib that's also really intense. And this is a scene that a lot of people quote when you quote Goodfellas, because some people love to quote this movie. There's more quotes later on. I had a friend who fell down one time and busted his arm open, and his answer to me when that happened was, man, I didn't want to get blood on your floor.
Aww.
Which comes in later. So they talk about this. Someone comes over, tries to collect the bill. The bill's $7,000. Joe Pesci gets pissed off because he basically gets embarrassed in front of his friends, being treated like he's a deadbeat who can't pay it, which he probably had no intention of paying anyways. So he beats up the guy who owns the shop. He cracks a bottle over his head. And then the next scene is that guy going to Paulie to ask for protection from Joe Pesci's character. And the way they decide to ask for protection is to ask him to, like, take a piece of the joint. Which, it's not like they're going to go and, like, go to a bank and, like, sign a bunch of papers and, like, he's going to buy a part of it.
He just become a co-owner.
He becomes a co-owner that collects money. But because he's going to collect money, he's literally asking him to take a piece of his profits to make sure he still gets profits. And he can go to him anytime he has problems with anyone because Paul's a boss. Like, he's not going to get fucked with. And then, of course, Joe Pesci still is going to do what he's going to do, but he's not going to do it in the traditional sense. Him and Ray Liotta decide that they're just going to buy a bunch of stuff and rack up a bunch of debt with the business, and everything they buy they're going to sell in the streets. They're going to fence it for less than it's worth, and all that debt is going to fall on the business. And the entire idea is to bankrupt it so that you can then burn it down and collect the insurance money. And that's the scene where they're talking about how any problems this guy has, no matter what, whether it's with business or he just can't make enough money, it's always going to be, fuck you, pay me. Place got hit by lightning, fuck you, pay me. Which is just a really good mantra to have if you're in any sort of debt collecting or if you have anyone that owes you money. And, of course, they burn down the place. And the scene outside the restaurant when they're waiting for it to catch fire is Joe Pesci asking Ray Liotta to be a wingman on a date with him. And Ray Liotta's pissed, and he tells him, like, you always ask me to do shit for you. I never ask you for anything. As they're burning this place down together, which Ray Liotta technically was supposed to be running this whole damn time. So it's this scene to set up what's going to happen next, which is Ray Liotta goes on a double date, and he meets Karen. And Karen is played by Lorraine Bracco, who is from The Sopranos. I believe she played the therapist in the show The Sopranos. By the way, I've never seen an episode of The Sopranos.
Never seen it.
So that might be a season where we both decide that we've never seen this, and we're going to go ahead and watch all of The Sopranos. Good. So Robin's just not into the whole mobster genre, but so they meet, and she hates him, and he hates her. He can't wait to leave. He drags her out of the place, like immediately drops her off and leaves, and then the next week they're all supposed to meet up again, and he stands her up. He doesn't show up.
Just her over-the-top sobbing in the restaurant is ridiculous.
For a person she doesn't really know.
Yeah.
And I think she's more insulted than hurt by the fact that he didn't like her. And of course, she tells Tommy, like, you're going to take me to find him. You don't see this, it's in voiceover, but you do see the scene where this bot that Henry grew up across from, that he still hangs out at, she pulls up there with Tommy, and it's just nothing but mobsters. Nothing but these Italian tough guys. And she gets out of that car and starts screaming at him that he's an asshole. How dare he do that to her? Who does he think he is? And she embarrasses him, and all the mobsters are laughing because it's so funny. And then Ray Liotta defends himself, and there's playful banter, and they're clearly flirting with each other, and it's just clear at this point that these two are going to fall in love.
Him getting yelled at turns him on. It's weird.
She has balls. Like, she decided that she was going to yell on the street in front of him, in front of all those people, and she didn't care who she was doing it in front of. And, like, that's just his thing. And, of course, the next scene is them going on a date, and him introducing himself to the mother as, like, half Jewish, which he is definitely not. And he says the line, which I've said in my life when you introduce something that you're half something, they say,
like,
which
I'm
half?
the good half.
Just the good half. Like, it's such a fucking cheesy
goodness.
line, but it's coming from this mobster, and it's just so funny to hear. And then we get this montage of them dating and them falling in love, and this leads to what I've always heard it referred to as the Goodfellas Shot. And the Goodfellas Shot is this shot within the movie Goodfellas, and that's why it's called that, where they pull up to the Copacabana, they get out of their car on the street, and then they walk into the restaurant/club, and the camera follows them. It's like a handheld tracking, and it follows them.
And he just gives money to everyone.
He gives money to everyone. It's a very, very long, continuous shot where they have to wind through this whole hallway, and there's restaurant staff. And if you pay really close attention, there's one older Asian guy in the kitchen who looks like directly at the camera like 2 or 3 times. And they walk all their way to the front, and then he gives money to the guy to like get him a table. They literally walk a table out to the very front, put it down for him. He walks to it. He says hi to everyone. They send him champagne. She asks him what he does. And then the comedian starts talking, and it's all one continuous shot. And if you ever remember, I don't know how many of you have seen the Star Wars movies, but there's the prequel, the episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, the opening sequence.
I've wiped that from my memory.
Yeah, that's a good thing. The opening sequence, they tried to tout the opening sequence as one long continuous shot that was all done with CGI. So it's like
that doesn't count.
They weren't like hiding cuts to like cheat their way through it. It was literally like CGI shit. It wasn't really a long continuous shot. If it was a bunch of blue screen with the camera moving through it, just pointing at blue screen
and then they
until
just
it
edit
points
it later.
at like yeah. But it was like, this was Scorsese, and this is funny. This shot was inspired by The Untouchables, because there's a long continuous shot as well in The Untouchables. So this was his like homage to that, and it's a very famous scene that people really appreciate because it's obviously very hard to do, and it took 7 takes to get it right. And one of the final takes that they did that they almost had it.
Good.
7 takes is really good, but the comedian at the end who tells his jokes, they got all the way through the entire scene, and the comedian forgot his jokes. The jokes that he tells normally anyways, like, he forgot the jokes that he was supposed to tell, so they had to reset and do the whole thing again.
Wow.
When they got to the very end. And I can only imagine as an actor in that massive of a scene, that coordination.
Your gangster comes out and you're just
like what the fuck? Like, I'm exhausted, bro. Like, it's just hilarious to think of like how much goes into movie making, and like when you break down a scene in your brain while you're watching it, that's kind of what we do when we watch horror movies. Like, oh, this would be funny to act out because you're just flopping around when you're acting possessed to like avoid the fact that you're starting to get a little scared. But when you look at a scene like this, just thinking about everything that goes into it, it's understandable why it's kind of famous. So the Goodfellas Shot happens. That's when they cut to them like making out in the convertible that they're in, and she talks about like how she didn't think it was weird, this 21-year-old guy who looks like a 35-year-old with all these connections. And
I like that you're like, this is young Ray Liotta.
It is young Ray Liotta. Like,
old.
have you seen Ray Liotta now? He's much older now. He's, okay, let me do the math. He's 30 years older, so he's like 65 now. So he's definitely much older, and he's in that new TV show. I don't know if it's still around. The one with Jennifer Lopez where he's a dirty cop, and she's like his daughter who's a cop. Whatever. So doesn't matter. Ray Liotta's really ridden the whole like crime train. I don't know what to call it, like the mob thing. Like that's really been like his shtick for a very long time. And it was funny because I was telling Robin,
he just has that face.
He does. And I was telling Robin, like, Joe Pesci's in this movie before we watched it. And she's like, who's Joe Pesci? And knowing Robin's taste in movies, I'm like, there's only one movie I know she's going to know him from. So I was like, he's the bad guy in Home Alone. He's the shorter one.
Oh, yeah.
And she knew it immediately. So I was just like, cool, you know who I'm talking about. So get ready to see him at his most, like, vicious and angry. Although he is also extremely vicious in the movie Casino, which Robin also hasn't seen. But I'll give her a reprieve before we move back into the mob genre.
Thanks.
So I know it's not your favorite thing. The next character we get introduced to is via commercial, which is a guy who sells wigs named Maury, which is a friend of I was going to say Ray Liotta. I mean, I can't say that. He's a friend of Henry who borrows money, obviously, and is a deadbeat, never has any intention of paying it back, who's arguing about the fact that he's supposed to pay money back to the most vicious killer that they know, which is Jimmy.
But then it's like, fuck you, pay me.
Exactly. So he bitches about it until Jimmy goes over there and starts strangling him with a telephone wire. Because he has money to make this commercial, but not money enough to pay him back.
He's like blowing his money on like horses or something.
On bullshit. He's literally on the phone making bets, saying that he doesn't have money to pay back this guy. So eventually they get a phone call, and Karen is calling because Karen has a problem. So Henry goes to pick up Karen because he's in love with her, and they're obviously going to be getting married soon or whatever. And he goes and picks her up on the side of the street at a phone booth, which like don't exist anymore.
Well, earlier in the movie, she introduces you to this guy that lived across the street.
It's like
from
a 15-second scene to introduce you to a character that's going to become relevant in an additional 45 seconds.
And so later on during this scene, she's like, it's my friend that I've known my whole life that lived across the street. And I immediately was like, oh, that one douchebag we met way earlier in the movie.
It wasn't even way early. It was during their falling in love montage. It just happened. So he picks her up. He basically tried to sexually assault her. She said no. They fought. He shoved her out of the car. And so
why was she in the car with him anyway?
That's a good question. Maybe because she trusted him and she was catching a ride. They live across the street from each other. Anyways, they go. Henry drops her off at her mom's house across the street. And he gets out of the car. And this is another pretty famous scene from Goodfellas. And I know I said we're going to do trivia at the end of it. I keep saying that, but I can't hold him back. So this is interesting and it's very sad. Ray Liotta, while they were filming this, his mother died of cancer. And he was very, very emotional because of it, and he still had to go and film. And he said that he channeled a lot of his remorse and his regret into later scenes where Henry's like basically fucking everything up and everything's spinning out of control. But his anger he channeled into the scenes that he was able to be angry, which were very far and few between. But this scene in particular, he channeled as much anger as he could into. And Henry gets out of his car, he takes a gun from his car and he tucks it in his belt. He walks across the street with this really angry face on, this vicious, scary face that he has on, which is different from the normal placid face he has on through the rest of the movie. And he walks up to this like fake yuppie tough guy who thought he was going to talk shit to him. And he says, "What's up, fucko? You want some?" Or some ridiculous thing where someone clearly doesn't know how to act like a hard ass. And it's just...
Well, he wasn't. He's like this rich kid.
So he grabs him by his fucking hair and pistol whips him in his driveway in front of his friends. Like,
breaks his nose
brutally
so fast,
pistol whips him and tells him, if you ever touch her again, you're dead. And then he points the gun at his friends just to establish the fact that he'll kill them
His friends are like, don't shoot.
Please don't. Like, they don't rush over there like friends that like tackle someone when they're beating the shit out of you. They just watch it happen.
They're just all a bunch of rich kids.
Yeah, and it's just like, and he walks back across the street and his hands are covered in blood because he just beat the shit out of this guy, and he hands Karen the gun and says, hide this. And of course,
the gun's covered in blood. His hands are covered in blood, and she's just like, and it turned me on.
She talks about how some of her friends would get out of the relationship, but like it turned her on. So then just smash cut to them stomping on the glass, yelling Mazel Tov, and now they're fucking married. So it's like all these red flags Karen wasn't really worried about because it's like the family we talked about earlier. He's protecting her. You know, she's very attracted to him. What he did was vicious, but like it was to protect her. So for some reason, she makes it in her head out to be like it's a good thing, or she can get down with it.
And then they go fast forward to them having all these kids, and then she asks him in one scene like, I need money. I need to go shopping. Can I have some money? And he's just like, how much do you need? And instead of saying a number amount, she lifts up her fingers and
thumb
shows
and her forefinger and shows the thickness of money
of how much she needs. I'm just like, Oh my goodness. You don't need that much money to go shopping.
You
Just
don't.
saying.
And
no.
especially like how much money.
I mean, I have like $10 in my bank account,
right?
so.
Like how much was she going to spend? But there's other stuff that happens here too. Like Henry stays out all night when they first get married and they're living with his in-laws. And so like the mother-in-law screams at him when he gets home and he takes off. So clearly they're going to be moving out.
I just think it's funny. He's walking up and he hasn't said a single word.
He just gets yelled at.
And then he just turns right around and walks back like just totally calm. Like,
there's been times in my life where I've dealt with situations like this where you just walk in, something happens like at work and you're just like, nope, I'm not dealing with this shit. And you just turn it off. And like, it just shows the clash of like, Karen has to get rid of her normal life, any part of her life that was normal, to fully immerse herself in this relationship with Henry, which she does. And they get their own place, and then like things start moving forward.
And then he's a skank. There's a point where they're like, this day at the Copacabana was like for wives, and
Saturdays
then this
for the
day
wives, Fridays
is
for the girlfriends.
And
yeah.
I was just like, really? He has a girlfriend? Oh, I was so
she was
annoyed.
So disappointed
I was
in
very
his
disappointed in his character.
But
so disappointed.
What's interesting here is that Karen realizes she's going to have to immerse herself in this lifestyle, and she goes and hangs out with all the other mob wives, basically, who are, it's just like the worst thing she could ever imagine. They're all talking about, like, all the drama that's going on in their lives and the world, and, like, all the people that are going to jail and dying, and then she goes and talks to Henry about it later, and Henry tells her, like, oh, you only go to jail if you want to, which is just the most bullshit line you can ever throw out there.
How can she believe that?
And she bought it, though. She totally buys it, and she says, like, it felt normal because they were always around each other. And it's this idea that is so relevant today still, where it's like if you exist within a closed loop, within an echo chamber, everything you say just gets repeated back to you. It's how like cults exist. And it's how people can like keep their minds closed to even thinking about anything from a different perspective. And she just gets absorbed into this lifestyle and it just becomes her life where it's like all of it seemed normal. We just figured that. And she repeats the words Henry says earlier in the movie, like, our husbands were enterprising young guys and the rest of people were lazy, sitting on their asses waiting for handouts. They're literally referring to working a job and getting a paycheck at this point as waiting for a handout, which is just baffling. But this is where the mindset is, and it's really taken you through the journey.
And that's why they do it. That's why they freaking go through all this crazy crap to make money.
And it's so much money they're making. I mean, they're just stealing everything, basically. But we cut to 1970 now. So we've moved forward quite a bit of time. We've jumped 7 years from Karen and them meeting to them having kids, and now we're at 1970. And the 1970 era kicks off, like this chapter of the movie, so to speak, kicks off with a blast from Tommy's past showing back up. Joe Pesci's character was a young man at one point. We've noticed that. And when you're young, you do what Henry did, which is earlier in the movie when he meets Jimmy, he's fetching drinks and making sandwiches for people. And apparently Tommy used to shine shoes. So he meets someone who is a made man named Billy Batts. Now, if you're a made man, that means you're basically like officially part of the club and not unofficially hanging out with them. And you cannot be touched by anyone. And immediately he starts busting Tommy's balls. Tommy, of course, is a tough guy and a hothead, doesn't appreciate it. They get into a verbal exchange, and he has to leave, essentially, because it's the middle of, like, this guy's party, and he's screaming at him, and they shove him out of the bar and tell him, like, just leave. There's nothing you can do. In which he responds, keep him here. Then they cut to the end of the night where no one's left but just Jimmy, which is Tommy's best friend, talking to Billy Batts about like how he just got out of jail or whatever. He was like away for a while, and Tommy shows back up at the bar. And this scene is absolutely brutal because Tommy walks in and punches Billy Batts in the face viciously. He collapses to the ground, and Tommy and Jimmy beat him within an inch of his life, to which Robert De Niro...
This is Henry's place.
This is Henry's place. He rushes to lock the door because no one else is in there.
Yeah.
And this is the line where Tommy looks at Henry and says, I didn't mean to get blood on your floor.
Yeah.
Because they just brutalize this dude. And I can't help but feel like, since there's so much improvised dialogue in this movie, that Robert De Niro improvised the line, this mutt dented my shoes. Which is just such a brutal line that he was kicking him so hard, he ruined his shoes doing so.
And when it comes to killing a maid man, you have to sit...
like how you say that, like with fake quotes and like a weird voice, like maid man.
You have to sit down with the bosses.
You have to literally
get
permission from his superior to do anything to him, including attack him.
Yeah,
and get an okay, which you figure if you have to go through that process, that he's going to find out sooner or later. But hey, there's a process, like read your standard operating procedure. And they definitely did not. So they think he's dead. They roll him up, they toss him in the back of the trunk, and now you're caught up to the scene that you saw at the beginning of the movie, because they pop the trunk because he's still awake. or he's still alive, I should say, and they fix that situation.
Once you pop the top, the fun don't stop.
I hate you so much. There's this wonderful scene where they stop to get a shovel from Tommy's mom's house, and that scene is 100% improvised.
Really?
All that dialogue is completely improvised, and it's just an interesting scene where they sit down, they have this nice meal with his mom in the middle of the night, and she talks about how she misses him, and he needs to settle down, and then they make this joke about a painting that has a guy in it that looks like the guy who's stuffed in their trunk. That painting was made by the author of the book, Wise Guy.
Wow.
So it's something that's like authentic. It's a piece of...
Joe Pesci's those like, I like it. The dog going one way and the other dog going the other. I was just like, really?
All of that shit is just them improvising, which is why it doesn't feel super authentic. But it's a really cool story because it's a really cool moment because the mom talks to Henry about how he's quiet because Henry Hill is normally very quiet and placid, and she talks about how she reminds her of someone that grew up, and she tells this funny story about like some guy who didn't talk at all, but when he talked, like his wife got mad. And I'll let you watch the movie. I won't spoil that part for you. I'm just going to spoil everything else because that's just so essential. But they then go on, of course, and Billy Batts gets buried. He's been shot, he's been stabbed, he's had the shit beaten out of him, he's definitely dead. And they bury him and they get rid of his body and hope no one finds out, because if they find out, all three of them are going to get murdered. Regardless of how much money they make or how vicious Jimmy is and how notorious he is, he's an Irish gangster that hangs out with Italians, and he's not part of the crew. He's not a made guy, so he will be murdered if they find out about this.
Do you think it's weird that we say murdered, but buried?
No,
they're spelt the same.
Robin says buried, right?
Yeah, you're buried alive.
See, and when she says it, like, I don't say anything. I don't want to get yelled at. I don't say anything like it's not how you say the word, because I mean that is how it's spelled. But it's one of those things where it's just
like murdered.
The English language. The English language is a confusing thing. But yeah, they bury him and they get rid of his body and they hope that everything is going to work out. And then, of course, after that, we see this montage that Robin's already referred to of Saturday is for the wives, Friday is for the girlfriends, and Henry has a girlfriend named Janice who he sets up in like an apartment. Sets up in an apartment, and he's of course like showing the place off, and he attacks her on the bed like sexually, like as a joke, like he's gonna make out with her or whatever, and like the girlfriends are all like,
and then he eye fucks her other friend.
He eye fucks her friend, who's played by Debbie Mazar. I'm pretty sure that's how you say her name. And so this is funny too. As she's backing up, she like stumbles and bumps against the wall. She was tripping over equipment.
Wow.
Yeah, Martin Scorsese thought that she was like, she looked so visually overwhelmed by Henry because of that, and she stayed in character, and they continued on with the scene that he would leave it in the movie. And it certainly just seems like Henry is just like epic level creep,
right,
that she's turned on by. So they leave that in there, and immediately, like, Robin, this is his first time seeing it. When you saw that, what did you think?
I was like, he's gonna bang her.
Yeah,
I already know. Like,
so sometimes like this happy accident can really just like represent exactly what you want it to in a film. And that's exactly what happens here. Like, it wasn't just him making a creepy face and her making eye contact. Like, that stumble, it's like, oh, she's done. Like, she's getting fucked. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So he has this girlfriend, and, you know, Robin's words to me, I think, at this point were like, this isn't going to end well for him, is it?
No. And I'm just like, how can he do this? It's like his wife is at home. He has kids. Everybody in the family likes her. You know, she takes all the kids over to Polly's all the time. Yeah. Like, they love their Uncle Polly.
She is absolutely a part of this culture. Like, she is one of them.
So why? It's just so disappointing.
They all do that. It's not like it's just Henry there with his girlfriend and the rest of them are there with their wives. They are all there with their girlfriends. And it's just this idea where it's like, you have a wife, you have a girlfriend, but
Jimmy
you never tell your wife.
At girlfriend
Jimmy
night.
wasn't there. That's a very good point.
Polly wasn't there.
Jimmy was probably murdering people, though. So Polly wasn't there. I think Polly had more dignity than that, but it's hard to tell. But we cut to another scene that's going to flash back to what happened at the beginning of the movie, right? So Henry used to serve drinks and make sandwiches and basically be like a gopher and an assistant until you get older. And they cut to a scene where they're all playing poker, and there's a kid named Spider. And Spider is getting drinks for everyone.
Who gives these kids these nicknames?
I don't know. But he forgets Joe Pesci's drink, which is probably the worst person to forget the drink from. Because, yeah, you could forget the drink from Jimmy, who's a murderer. Jimmy's still a reasonable person who kills when he has to, or for fun sometimes. But Tommy is just unstable. So Tommy starts fucking with him and yelling at him, and he makes him go get him a drink. And in doing so, he talks about a movie, The Oklahoma Kid, where there's a scene where you shoot at someone's feet and make them dance, which he then, of course, takes out his gun and starts doing. And if you do this in real life, you're going to shoot someone, which he does. He shoots Spider in the foot.
Well, he's just, like, trying to scare him first.
Yeah, he's not intending to shoot Spider, but he's stupid and he's fucked up, and he shoots him in the foot.
Yeah.
So they take Spider to the hospital, or they take Spider to the mob doctor, basically, not the hospital.
Yeah, the doctor down the street.
And so you're thinking like, wow, that's just showing how unstable Tommy is. And the older he gets, the wilder he's getting. And they've already had problems with him in the movies, so let's see where this develops to. And you think at this point it's going to be more about Tommy.
And the kid just comes back.
Yeah.
The kid just comes back.
But there's a scene between that, though. Someone shows up at someone else's apartment. Because Karen was the chick who, when Ray Liotta pissed her off, when Henry was rude to her, showed up in front of all these mob guys and was like, how fucking dare you? So Karen, at this point, knows something's going on. She confronts Henry. Henry tells her, you're fucked up in your head. This is all in your head. Which is just such a horrible thing to say to someone. If anyone ever says that to you, I don't know if they're hiding something, but they're wrong, and that is fucked up. And so, of course, she goes through his shit, and she finds out about Janice. And she shows up at the apartment, and she buzzes, and it's just this board of all these buzzer numbers.
Janice is such a weak-ass bitch.
Yeah,
just
she
saying,
could not handle this shit.
She just hides and just, like, is scared, hiding behind a pillow. It's like she's not at your apartment. Like, what are you...
She's downstairs. She presses the button. She starts screaming at her, calling her a whore. And then Karen gets the idea to press every button all at once to let everyone in the building know that Janice is a whore and what apartment she lives in. Then she calls the superintendent. She's going full-blown Karen at this point.
Yeah.
Because Karen's fucking a little bit crazy. So this happens, and then the next thing you know is Henry taking a nap at home, waking up, and he wakes up to Karen having a gun pointed directly at his fucking face. So he talks her, he sweet talks her, he tells her he only loves her, she's all he wants, he calms her down, she starts to cry, she lowers the gun, and he grabs it from her and he slaps her across the face, and the tables turn and he has the gun on her, and he screams at her that he has to worry about getting killed in the streets, and now he's going to come home for this shit. Which just shows you, to this point, this unreliable narrator has been fucking lying to you about all the easy things that go on with the mob and how it's all just protection for people that need protection. No, these fuckers kill each other, like, just brutally whenever they want to. So he leaves. She screams she's sorry, like somehow she's done something wrong.
Thinks it's her
aside
fault
from pointing the gun at him and being insane.
Because she loves him, and she feels like, I can't do anything about it. I would never hurt him because I love him too much.
Yes.
And I'm just like, this is the reason why women are stuck in abusive relationships.
This is her life, and she's not going to let someone take her life away from her. That's where she's at. She blames Janice, and she blames Henry, but at the same time, if Henry's going to stay with her, she's going to keep going. So Henry leaves, and it cuts to what Henry probably goes to do to blow off some steam, which is go play cards. And Spider's back with a bandaged up foot, and he's fetching drinks for everyone, and of course, Tommy, being the guy he is doing...
But it's because Jimmy's antagonizing him.
Well, here's the thing, though. Tommy's fucking with Spider the entire time, the entire scene, and then Spider gets sick of it. A young kid, and then there's this mobster who's dangerous, who's already shot you, and he turns to me and says, why don't you go fuck yourself, Tommy? And so everyone just is like, oh! And Jimmy is like, this kid's got some real fucking balls.
You gonna let him do that
to
you?
You gonna let him do that to you?
It's like,
So Tommy takes out his gun and fucking shoots Spider to death.
And then Jimmy's just like, I was fucking kidding. Like, what is wrong with you?
He asks him, are you a sick fucking maniac? Which is like, you're a sick fucking maniac. You're all maniacs. So they bury Spider, they have to get rid of the body, and then they start talking about the fact that murders are a normal thing. It's how everyone is kept in line. So if you get out of line and it's a bunch of alpha tough guys, and if anyone gets out of line, someone's going to die. And that's just the way the mob works. So now you're like an hour into the movie and realizing like this isn't the peachy thing that's been painted out to be, where it's like everything is good, you make a bunch of money, you take it from people who want it to be taken from them. And it's like, no. People get killed constantly for things like telling someone to go fuck themselves because they accidentally shot you. And then they purposely shoot you and then you're dead. So this is where we're at in the movie. And I think we might have transposed the scenes with Spider getting shot and Janice getting confronted and Henry getting confronted, but at this point, there's an intervention. Paulie and Jimmy come and they talk to Henry and they tell him, like, look,
you gotta go back to your wife.
You gotta go back to your wife. You have kids. Like, this isn't okay. Like, you can do what you want to do, which is just a weird thing. They tell him, like, you have to go back to your wife.
But you have to do this.
But you can do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. We're not saying you can't. Which is basically like, keep cheating on her. That's fine. But you have to stay with her. Like, have your mistress, but stay with your wife. Because they're not animals. He says, we're not animale. And it's like this bizarre scene where they tell him, like, look, we're going to tell her everything's going to be fine. You're going to go back to her. There's going to be romance. But in the meantime, go to Florida, fix something for us, take a little vacation afterwards, then come back and work on your marriage. So they cut to Florida where they're, of course, beating the living fuck out of some guy that owes them money. They hang him upside down in the lion pit like they're going to drop him in there. And I've seen some Florida headlines, and that does match up with some of the shit that happens in Florida.
Some chick freaking jumped over a zoo.
I don't know if that was Florida, but yeah, some chick jumped over the barrier so that she could take a selfie in like the jaguar enclosure, and she got slashed up. And they said it wasn't life-threatening. The family of the lady still had them call the paramedics to the scene. And the zoo said, like, she crossed the border when she wasn't supposed to. The animal is most certainly not going to be destroyed. But in this case, in Goodfellas, they're dangling this guy, so he'll give them money, which he eventually does.
And that guy's sister works for the FBI.
So when they come home, they're going to jail. And they get sentenced to 10 years in jail. It's not a small sentence either. So the scene is them...
But it's not jail!
Well, that's the thing. The scene is them saying, like, goodbye to everyone, so they actually get to go say bye to everyone, then surrender themselves to the jail, and then they get to jail, and Robin is so funny when we're watching this scene, because she's like, wait, I thought they were in jail, and I'm like, they are. They are.
They're in an apartment in jail.
When they cut to the montage of them in jail, what's the montage describing?
Their dinners, so that like how fancy their dinners are, and Polly's sitting there with a little razor blade cutting garlic,
which is just genius. If I had the time to do that, like I was in prison, I probably cut my garlic with a razor blade too, so that it would liquefy in the pan.
Well, you could just use one of those mandolins, yeah, and just slice it real thin.
Why didn't Paul use that? He seems like a smart guy.
This is a long time ago. Maybe they weren't.
You think mandolins weren't invented in the 1970s?
I don't know. Anyway, no, and then they have freaking lobster. This guy's making steaks. Like, Henry's bringing, like, I got red wine, I got white wine, I got scotch, I got bread, I got cheese.
Don't forget that he's also got pills that he's selling to other inmates to make money so that he can that his wife and his kids can survive.
This is not jail. It was not jail.
It's just jail for wise guys, is how they put it.
It was insane.
But then he has to go to normal visiting hours, which is basically like a cafeteria. Like if you ever went to public school, which I think a lot of us did, like the cafeteria where everyone just mills around their long bench like seats.
It's like that in private school.
It's really, I've never been to private school, but it's really funny because it's like the first thing you see in this giant visiting room is some dude sitting there surrounded by a bunch of other people getting a blowjob from a chick. And then the camera tracks a little bit to the right, and about 5 feet away you see a lady changing a baby, which gives you the sense of what you're really dealing with prison visitor hours. And of course, when Karen's signing in, who is the person smuggling all this shit into Henry, she sees the name of Janice, who has visited Henry prior. And so when she confronts him, she starts throwing all this contraband at him, like, let her carry this shit in for you, which is just another moment where it's like, yeah, you're fucked up, Karen. You shouldn't be doing any of this shit. Why are you still with this guy?
Yeah.
But it's a badass moment, though.
And she has the kids with her.
But it's this badass moment where she's like, you want to fuck around on me? Let her write letters to the parole board. Let her smuggle this shit in. It's just this moment where it's like, it's awkward and it's painful, and you could see it all over Henry's face where he's like, stop doing this to me. And she's like, no, I'm not going to stop until you say you're going to stop. And it's like this power move by Karen when Henry's at his lowest and she's also at her lowest. And then they decide, like, they have to do this shit together or they're never going to make it. And so she demands from him she never wants to hear about Janice again. And he says never. And to his credit, Janice is never again brought up in the movie. She is gone. She is done with.
And then comes Sandy.
Then he's fucking Sandy instead, which is Debbie Mazar's character, who I fucked earlier. So he's just like, I will never fuck Janice again. And immediately goes and gets a different girlfriend, which is the mindset of a person who thinks he's doing the right thing.
But he needs someone, because now he's peddling drugs. He needs someone to do all that crap.
But we're skipping ahead a little bit. He doesn't start dating her until he gets out. He's in prison for 4 years. He gets out. He goes and sees where Karen's living with his kids, who are getting much older at this point. And he tells her immediately upon coming home, like, pack the shit up. We're moving. Because he has money, he's going to go meet his Pittsburgh guys, which is he's going to start dealing in cocaine.
And then he goes to Polly's house, and Polly's like, bruh, we don't do drugs.
This is a very intense scene. Polly pulls him aside. They're having everyone over. Polly's on parole. Polly doesn't want anyone doing anything, but especially Polly forbids, and this is true in real life, the man that is based off of, Polly forbid his lieutenants from selling drugs. He didn't want anything to do with it, and he tells them in this scene that there's a guy named Gribbs, I think he says, and he is going to die in prison because he had someone in his crew who sold drugs, and somehow he went to jail for it. That's where he's going to die. And he said, that's not going to happen to me. And
I mean, Polly is not a horrible person in comparison to everyone else.
Polly kind of represents what Henry says the organization is supposed to represent, but they're out of control. Polly's trying to keep everyone in line. During this scene, Polly slaps Henry in the face to, like, wake him up, like, I'm fucking serious right now. That was improvised by the actor who played Polly. Ray Liotta had no idea that was coming.
Is that why his face is just like,
what the hell? Yeah, he's like scared, like he's shocked by it. because he tells him, like, just don't do it. He tells him, I know what you were doing. I know that you were dealing drugs when you were in jail, but you were in prison. That's what you had to do. You're out now. Don't fucking do it. And, of course, smash cut to Sandy cutting up giant piles of cocaine for Henry. And then you realize that they're going to go and do another heist.
So there's a scene. There's a scene where they're, like, pressing the cocaine into what looks like bath bombs, all right?
This was an awkward moment for me. I'm not going to lie.
We're sitting there and we're just like, why are they doing that? What is that
Robin
for?
says, why are they doing that? And I was like, I don't know, like they're measuring it. And my mom is watching this movie because she loves Goodfellas with us. And she goes, those are 8 balls.
I was just like, what?
I was like, oh God, I'm not asking questions. I'm glad you know. It's probably because she's seen the movie so many times. And not because she lived through the 80s. But yeah, we were just like, okay, cool. Good information to know. But so we move on now, and it cuts to them in a montage planning a heist. Not like the Air France heist that they had earlier. Maury has this idea. He's been plotting this heist that's going to bring in millions of dollars, but he can't do it. He's outsourcing it to these guys that he knows. So Jimmy's going to be in charge. Jimmy's going to bring on a crew. And at this point, we meet one of the only African-American characters that you see in this entire fucking movie. And I ask Robin, hey, do you recognize that guy? And she says no, which was shocking to me because I figured she'd recognize him right away. And of course, it is Samuel L. Jackson.
I could not believe he was so.
It's baby Samuel L. Jackson.
Tall and so thin, and to me, Samuel Jackson's like a bigger, broader dude.
This is the 90s though, so he's still fairly older in his life. He's not like a teenager or anything.
Didn't Samuel Jackson say he didn't start acting till he was 40?
Yeah, he didn't get his big break till he was in his 40s.
Yeah.
He started out, Samuel L. Jackson actually started out with public speaking courses to get over his fear of public speaking, which is like the number one fear of most people. And that led to him acting.
Now he's just sick of those motherfucking snakes on those motherfucking planes.
He's so sick of these motherfucking kitty cats on these motherfucking spaceships. Go watch Captain Marvel. Or not. It doesn't matter. So anyways, it's kind of funny though when you think about Samuel L. Jackson though, because he confronted his greatest fear in life, and the life that he has now is directly because of that. So maybe we should all confront our greatest fears in life and then be super famous and be in movies by Martin Scorsese.
My greatest fear is failure.
So confront failure? I don't know.
Just fail real hard. Story of my life.
So, anyways. So after they tell you the crew and everything they're going to do, they cut to Henry in the shower, showering up, because he kind of just coordinated this. He wasn't going to be part of the actual heist. And the radio comes on and it has the bulletin that Latanja had a heist, and it's one of the biggest the country has ever seen.
And Henry's just like, man, you guys did it. What?
He's celebrating in the shower. He's screaming Jimmy's name because he knows Jimmy was the one who did it. And they say it's either $2 million or $4 million or $5 million missing. It was $6 million. That's how much they got. And then they cut to them celebrating in the bar. Henry comes in, he hugs Jimmy, and then what happens? Some guy from the crew shows up. He just bought a brand new Cadillac. And it's like, and he tells him, like, are you serious? And he says this at least 20 times to him, like, what's the matter with you? What's the matter with you? And he's so fucking angry at him because it's like, you're going to draw attention that we have money now.
I wrote a note down, like, why do they always repeat lines over and over and over again?
Sometimes they repeat lines so that you can get extra takes, and sometimes they just leave that in there to show you, like, how awkward this scene is. Like, how awkward this moment is for this guy being confronted. Like, he wants a fucking answer from him. And this crazy murderer is going to keep asking him that until he says something. So as soon as he finally apologizes and walks away, the next person walks in with a $20,000 mink coat.
Yeah.
To which he takes it off of the guy's wife, tells him to take it back, yells at him, has him leave.
I love that she's just like, I don't want to take it back.
But I love this coat. And he's like, shut the fuck up, let's go. Because he knows Jimmy is going to fucking kill him.
He's one of the dudes that had a girlfriend at the Copacabana.
He is. So you're okay with him being murdered.
Yes,
you're like, he deserves to go. At this point, we see Samuel L. Jackson again in the movie, and you find out that his role in this thing was to take this truck, steal it, and then dump it somewhere so that the police could never recover it. He decided that he was going to go hang out with his girlfriend, get high, and pass out, which he did, so the cops got the truck. So then, as Robin's finally realizing that this is Samuel L. Jackson, he then gets murdered by Tommy.
I literally was just like, that's Samuel Jackson? And then it's just like, bam!
And I told her, like, and that's how Nick Fury lost his eyeball. Now you know.
Whoa.
So, anyways.
Gotta watch Captain Marvel, find that out.
They let you know that Tommy is now about to be made. And this is another famous scene where they have, like, the piano portion of the song Layla play over this montage where they show you Jimmy and he's super happy.
Does he eat world?
And I hate you so much. And they're also showing that basically everyone in this crew, this Latanja crew that did this heist, Jimmy is just killing all of them. He's getting rid of them so he doesn't have to pay them so he can keep the money. He gave a little bit of money to Henry. He kicked money upstairs to the boss, Paulie, and that's it. He probably gave Tommy some too.
And that Maury dude.
And no, that's the thing, though. Maury's still alive. Maury will not stop asking for money.
Yeah.
So Maury keeps fucking with him.
Because he won't give him the money.
He won't give him money, and he's supposed to get $500,000 out of this whole thing because it was his idea. He tells Henry that he's going to kill Maury. Not outright, he just tells him, like, do you think he talks to his wife? Who does he talk to? Okay, make sure he's here tonight. And he knows he's going to kill him, and then at some point, Tommy, who's this guy that does nothing but bullshit and tell jokes all the time, has everyone rolling in laughter at this poker game that they're having, and so Jimmy finally tells Henry, like, you know what, forget about tonight. And Henry's relieved because he doesn't want Maury to die. But of course, Maury follows Jimmy out of this place after everyone's gone home and asks him for money one last time. So he tells him, like, why don't you actually come with us? So they get in the car, and Tommy shoves an ice pick into his fucking brain and kills Maury. So Maury's dead.
How does he happen to have an ice pick on him?
I'm sure he was going to be one of the people that was involved in the murder anyways, but you really get the feeling at this point, like, if Maury would have kept his mouth shut, he probably would have lived. Had he not followed them when they were leaving, he might not have died. And then we get the montage of everyone dying, everyone being killed from the crew. Then we get the montage where Layla's played. I was jumping ahead a little bit earlier, and you get told that Tommy is going to get made. So he's going to be one of these guys that's untouchable, that you need permission to go to a boss from, that will eventually possibly become a boss himself. And you get explained...
It's so sad, though, because Jimmy's been in there forever. He's never going to be a boss.
Because he's an Irishman.
And Henry's way better at what he does, and he's never going to be a boss.
Henry's the most like a boss aside from all the fucking drugs that he does and sells, but he's half Irish, half Italian, but because he has Irish blood, he will never be made, and he will never, like, move up. So... he talks about where the name Goodfellas comes from, and it's just telling someone, like, you're going to like this person, he's one of us. He's a good fella, which is just so dumb. It's like one of those titular lines that you wish they would have just cut out of the movie. And, of course, this entire ceremony is supposed to be happening. They take Tommy to where he's supposed to be made, and it's empty. And they shoot Tommy in the back of the head, which comes out of his face that his mother can't have an open coffin.
Yeah.
It's all revenge because they killed Billy Batts earlier in the movie. They couldn't determine whether or not Jimmy or Henry were there. They just know that Tommy was going to be involved, so they killed Tommy. And
because of all the animosity he showed in front of everyone.
Exactly. And now everything is going to spiral out of control. Because Tommy's gone, Jimmy's angry, Henry's messed up.
Henry's all up in that cocaine.
He's really fucked up in
cocaine!
Motherfucking cocaine! So we play a game sometimes called Betrayal on Haunted Hill. I think that's what it's called.
Betrayal at Haunted Hill.
It's like Betrayal at the House on Haunted Hill or some stuff like that. It's a very fun tabletop game if you ever want to play a game. There's an item that you can get in this game where if you roll a dice and it lands on something, like one of your traits goes up, another one of your traits goes down, and if you use it enough, you die. And every time we play it, I basically say that I've just found a giant stash of cocaine, and your speed goes up, so you can move faster and faster. So I just basically run through this mansion screaming, "Motherfucking cocaine!" It's just fun to do. So yeah, they're sponsoring us, and not really, not at all. Okay, let's get back into this movie.
Henry Hill, hit us up.
Henry Hill is dead.
What?
We'll get to that.
Oh, shit. Wow. Today I learned.
So now we get another flash forward. Now we flash forward to May 11th, 1980, which is my birthday. I would have been -5 years old. So, anyways.
I would have been -9.
Wow. See, 4 years of difference. Not that big of a difference. Anyways.
It sounds big.
So this is a really big day. And this is a part where you really understand that Henry is not just an unreliable narrator, but at this point, he's really fucking coked out of his mind. And his, like, unreliable narrator has just been taken to a new level. He's delivering guns to Jimmy. He bought some guns because Jimmy requested it. And he's complaining in the voiceover that Jimmy's not going to want the guns, and he doesn't know why. And Jimmy's trying to affix his silencer to the gun, and it won't fit. They don't match. So he's telling him, like, why the hell did you even buy these things? Like, I don't want them. I'm not paying for them. And he tells him, like, stop doing all those drugs. They're turning your brain into mush. And in this scene, like, the narration is basically like, this is all Jimmy's fault. But if you're watching the scene and you have it on mute, like, it is very clearly Henry's fault for buying the wrong guns to go to the silencers.
And he's just coked out.
And maybe Jimmy told him the wrong thing, but with, like, the meticulous nature of Jimmy, you just have to imagine, like, this is on Henry.
And he's getting followed by a helicopter this whole time.
And he's getting followed by a helicopter. And because they've established that he's an unreliable narrator and he's coked out of his mind, you can't help but wonder. And Robin, in fact, even asked me during this scene, like, is he actually seeing a helicopter or is he just paranoid? To which I just responded with silence because she's going to find out. And it's just this idea that everyone he tells that he sees this helicopter tells him he's paranoid because they know he's coked out of his fucking mind.
His wife sees it, but she's also coked out.
She's also doing coke too anyways. And they do a great job of the makeup where they make them look like cokeheads and they're always just moving as fast as they possibly can. And he's trying to ditch the helicopter, so he goes and takes the guns and drops them off.
He's trying to handle all his cocaine right now.
He's trying to do a cocaine deal while
Yes.
also picking up his brother who's in a wheelchair.
Yes.
While also cooking dinner for everyone.
Yep.
And like food plays such a heavy feature in this movie. You just constantly see food.
Is it because of the Italian family
it's this
mentality?
rich Italian culture where it's like everyone cooks in the family, and like dinner and family dinner is such an important thing. So even during like the most important drug deal of the movie, he's still taking breaks to go home and make sauce and make veal cutlets and it's
meatballs.
just so cool.
Like there's a point where he's making meatballs. He still like has this meatball in his hand while he goes checks outside the door for a helicopter.
He's
and
literally
I'm just
holding
like,
it. She's
oh
like,
my god,
why is he walking down the hallway with meat in his hand? And I'm like, because he's coked out of his fucking mind. He runs all over the place. He tries to ditch the helicopter. They drop stuff off. They go shopping. They go pick it up once the helicopter disappears. They do their coke deal, and then they go home. He goes to Sandy's house because she's the one that's like cutting the drugs for him and like putting stuff in it so he can get like more cocaine out of it. I'm not going to explain to you how that works, just in case you guys don't know and you decide you want to become coke dealers. Just watch Blow. It's another movie that I've made Robin watch that she didn't really enjoy.
No.
So he goes home. Everything's settling down.
I like
they just
Public
had
Enemy.
dinner.
That one's good.
Public Enemies. I actually don't like Public Enemies.
Shut.
It was filmed nearby where I grew up too. So it was filmed in Crown Point, Indiana. Some of it was, and I grew up in Valparaiso, Indiana. So. But let's focus on Goodfellas here before you yell at me about Public Enemies. Plus, I had Johnny Depp.
Is it Enemies or Enemy?
Public Enemies?
It's Enemy because it's only about John Dillinger.
I mean, it's about his like whole crew too. Like, there's a lot of people in it. I always forget that Christian Bale's the guy that's trying to catch him too.
Maybe it is Enemies.
I think it's Enemies. It doesn't matter. So let's keep moving forward here. So everything's calmed down. They have their babysitter working for them. Their former babysitter's flying back and forth, and she's the one
it's an adventure in babysitting.
I hate you so much. They use the song from Adventures in Babysitting during the Goodfellas shot, too. And then he kissed me. But anyways, so she works for them. She flies back and forth between Pittsburgh. She transports drugs on her flights by carrying babies with her, so no one notices. And then the baby bags, and also like strapped to her legs, are pounds of cocaine. So she comes to Henry at 10:45 at night before they're getting ready to leave for the flight and tells him, you have to take me home. I forgot my lucky hat, and I will not fly without it. And, like, Henry's kind of a vicious gangster, you know? She knows what she's involved in.
He told her, don't use my fucking house phone to call.
Yes, I forgot about that part.
Don't
when they're
use
coordinating
my house
everything,
phone.
he calls home specifically to tell her not to use the house phone.
Go outside and use a public phone.
Call from an outside line. And she tells him, like, I will, you're such a pain. And then, of course, she calls from his fucking house phone. And he says, if anyone's listening, they know we're leaving tonight. There's a package and the exact time we're leaving.
The time, the flight, everything.
They would know all of it. So they leave to take her home to get her lucky hat for this thing. And when I first saw this movie, I was like, maybe them leaving at a time they're not supposed to leave is going to save them from this.
She had him go outside so he could get caught.
No,
right?
Not at all. She wasn't part of it. She's just an idiot. She's a bad, bad babysitter. They get in the car to leave. They start backing out, and the cops arrest them. So this is the third time Henry's been pinched at this point. So this time is much worse because Paulie told him not to do it. He's violated Paulie's orders. That means Paulie's going to have him killed. Also, if Paulie finds out that Jimmy is involved in it, Paulie's going to have Jimmy killed as well. So now Jimmy wants to kill Henry, and Paulie wants to kill Henry, and Henry is stuck in fucking jail. So he needs to get out desperately. So his mother-in-law, who hates his guts, puts her house up for his bail, and he's able to get out. He goes to look for some of the cocaine that he stashed in the house, which Karen flushed during the raid, and finds out that it's not there anymore, and that $60,000 he thought he was going to have by selling it is gone.
And he just breaks down.
And this is the point where it's rock bottom for Henry, where he has an absolute breakdown, because he realizes he's going to die.
Well, like, Henry breaks down, and then Karen's just like...
Karen breaks down seeing Henry break down. And that scene where they're like wrapped up on the floor, it's like a very emotional scene where they're just like, it's a far off shot where they're just stuck in the corner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you just realize like, wow, these people are really fucked right now. And of course, what does he do at that point? He has nothing else he can do. He goes to see Paulie. And he goes to see Paulie knowing very well that Paulie could just kill him.
Yes.
Like, get rid of his problem.
Well, the entire night, he thinks someone's going to come in and kill him.
He's sleeping with a gun in his hand.
And then he goes to see Paulie, and Paulie's just like the nicest fucking dude.
Yeah, he even tells him, like, you lied to my fucking face, dude. Like, you treated me like I never meant anything to you. Because at this point, Paulie has basically served as the father figure in his life. Like, somewhat Jimmy, somewhat Paulie, but Paulie's been the guy who's actually been, like, a rock versus Jimmy who's, like, unstable. And he tells Paulie, like, he has nothing else. He has no one else to go to, and he needs him, and Paulie hands him $3,200. And he tells him, like, now I have to turn my back on you. And he says, $3,200 for a lifetime. It wasn't even enough to pay for the coffin. And it's like, that's a really strong line.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, what you were just... also, like, how expensive
love
is your
that
coffin in
Pauly-
fucking 1980, bro?
I love that Polly's cooking the entire time.
And Paulie's cooking sausages.
Yeah.
And so after that, he goes and he talks to Karen, and he tells Karen, like, we have to get out. We have to go to the cops. And Karen tells him, like, you're paranoid, you've done too much cocaine. And she secretly, without telling him, goes to see Jimmy, who wants both of them dead. And so she's talking to him. Jimmy, of course, hands her a giant wad of cash, because that's what they do. Tells her to go pick out some dresses, but it's not in his store. It's actually in an alley down the fucking street. And Karen gets whiff of the fact that something's wrong here, and she's probably about to be murdered. So she jumps in her car and drives away. And when she gets home, she's sobbing, and then after that, she's on board with getting out of this shit.
Yeah,
because
because she realizes they're going to die.
They are. Everything that he's been saying is true, and it's not just because he was coked out of his mind. He's actually getting clean at this point. So they go to the FBI, and there's this montage where the FBI guy is telling him, like, look, this is how it's going to be, because Karen wants some sort of contact with her parents, so she might not go with.
It's not really a montage, is it?
It is, though, because at first it's just a scene where he's explaining to them, like, if he's in witness security, if he's in witness protection, they're going to come for you and your kids because they can't get to him. And that you're just as guilty as he is. I've listened to wiretaps where you're talking about cocaine. You knew exactly what was going on. Then the montage kicks in of Jimmy getting arrested and of Paulie getting arrested. And everyone going down because of what Henry's going to tell them.
He threw Paulie under the bus after
everything Paulie did. Because that's the thing, though. Like, the FBI, they knew Paulie was the boss of this organized crime ring, and they're going to try and, like, he's the big guy. He's the big fish. He's the one that's going to make their career by taking him down. And that's exactly what they go and do. And then the next scene is them in court. And he's fingering, like, not literally, but he's pointing at Jimmy, and he's pointing at Paulie, and he's telling them what happened. And it's a voiceover at the same time about, like, the life he led.
What I thought was really cool is it went from voiceover to Henry in the stands getting up and telling you everything that happened.
Like, he literally talks to camera to end the voiceover of him in the court, because he ends the line. That scene ends with him saying, and now it's all over. And it cuts to a scene of them in, like, suburbia America, somewhere where they're building a subdivision somewhere that's going up, and he's going out on his doorstep to pick up his paper, and he looks like an ordinary guy, and he talks about how his life is boring, he's ordinary now, he's a schnook, as he puts it.
And then at the end, they're like, oh, BT Dubs, he got arrested again for peddling drugs.
Yeah, he got arrested yet again.
I think when I read that, I was like, he has this problem where he can't sit still.
He has to live this high-risk lifestyle, because that's just who he is.
Yes, and he can't just have that average 9 to 5 because he will get bored, and it's just something that he just can't do.
Yeah. And it's you end this movie kind of feeling bad for Henry because he's disconnected from his life, but also just fucking hating his guts. And like she said, they tell you that he was arrested again in, I think it was 1987. He separated from his wife, Karen, after 25 years of marriage in 1989. And then the saddest thing that you probably see in the post-credit scene, well, it's not like an after-credit scene. It's not like Nick Fury walks in and is like, let's talk about the Avengers Initiative.
Wow.
They let you know that in 1988, Paulie dies in prison. What he said he did not want to do, what he told him, this isn't going to happen to me. That's exactly what happened to him in real life. He died in prison.
Because of respiratory failure or something?
I think he had a heart attack. I think he had it was a cardiac issue.
It says respiratory something.
Well, I looked it up, so fudge you. And then
the movie's wrong.
And then they let you know that Jimmy is going to be in jail until 2004, 2006.
2004.
And that'll be the first time he's eligible for parole. But they don't tell you anything else about what happened to him. And that's just the end of the movie. So obviously we're done with the movie now. But before we do like the official wrap up and the rating and stuff like that, I do want to mention the fact that there's more information that people obviously kind of wanted to know. I know Robin wanted to know. Did Jimmy get out? Did Jimmy Conway get out? Because you figured the first person he's going to go kill is Henry, especially now that this movie's out. Jimmy does not get out. Jimmy died on April 13th, 1996.
Wow.
From stomach cancer. He had 8 years to go. So it was 2004, actually, when he would have been eligible for parole for the first time.
Wow.
And so Henry Hill, however, Henry Hill lived. No one killed him. He, in fact, did an interview.
Well, he was in witness protection, I mean.
Yeah, but he did an interview. I mean, people could have found him where they talked to him about, like, don't you think, like, someone should have come for you by now? Which is an awkward question to ask someone at an interview. And he said that I think at one point that the organization just kind of fell apart and there was no actual like organization to speak of with whoever was left. They were all disorganized, so no one could coordinate.
They got the boss. Who was
no one
do
could
anything?
coordinate coming to get him, basically. And where he's at now when the interview took place, which was in the 2000s, that the people from his era are basically all gone. So he's just a relic of this era that's passed and no one's going to come kill him because it doesn't even matter anymore. And he died of natural causes in his 70s.
Wow.
So he lived a long life, and he even mentioned like he can't believe he got to live a long life. And he did. And he became like this pseudo-celebrity after this shit
What
all
happened
went
to
down.
Karen?
So I didn't look up Karen because they divorced after 25 years of marriage and they never got back together. So Henry Hill got arrested again and wound up serving 11 years in prison due to what he was doing, which was just more drug trafficking shit. So obviously this guy just never fucking learned his lesson. So that's the movie Goodfellas. I know a lot of you have probably seen it. For those of you who haven't, you've basically seen it now. And this is Robin's first time seeing it. So Robin, like, what are your impressions with this movie?
I think it was a good movie, but it is not, like, 10 out of 10 would not watch again. I'm good watching it the one time.
Because it's so intense.
It is a very intense movie. It's not like a silly comedy that you put on in the background.
Right.
Just to have that noise in the background, you know? It's something where it's so intense, every single scene. Like, I remember everything because it was, like, so absolutely intense. And it's a good movie.
But
solid.
you don't really need to see it again.
I don't need to see it again.
This is one of those movies where when I was a kid, I used to watch it all the time. I say kid, like teenager, early 20s. I'm in my 30s now, so everything younger than me as a kid. But the older I get, the more I'm like, you know what, like, I'll watch it every once in a while.
Wait, so I'm a kid to you?
Yes, you are. You're a child.
Wow.
Congratulations. Goo goo gaga. But everything basically that happens in this movie is intense, but it's like, I don't really need to keep watching this movie and over. I've probably seen it like 50 times. I'll watch something else in the background at this point in my life. But there was a point in my life where this is what I wanted to watch, like, constantly. Like this, like this genre, like this casino Blow. Like, I remember I watched Blow with my friends. We all sat down. We're like, so are we going to sell cocaine now?
Blow's the kind of movie that I'm like, I'm good watching it once.
Once and never again.
Never
There's definitely
again.
movies like that I just like, I've seen once and I'm good to go with it. So you're going to give it a 10 out of 10? Like,
no,
perfect score.
No. I said 10 out of 10 would not watch again.
That's what I thought
but
you were rating.
But my rating for it as a movie, an 8. Eight or 9 out of 10.
8, that's pretty good.
So an 8.5. I'll give it an 8.5.
That's pretty good.
Just because I don't want to watch it again. That's why it's not getting like a good score. You know
You're
what I mean?
ready to give it a 10. I'm going to make you watch it another time.
Ugh, I'm good.
We have too many movies to watch at this point for the show, so
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to circle back on a whole lot of stuff, except for like whatever we put on for background noise during our downtime.
Yeah, no, so 8.5.
Right on. I think Goodfellas for me is one of my favorite mob movies of all time. It might actually be my favorite mob movie of all time, and it's a brilliant piece of work by Scorsese. And like, we could break down this movie and we could be like snobs with our pinkies in the air, but realistically, like, we're two people who enjoy movies. You know what I mean?
I like movies that I want to watch over and over and over again.
I can enjoy a bad movie. Like, I've watched Face Off more times than I care to count, and I will never sit there and defend it and tell you that it's a good movie, but it's just entertaining and it's fun. So we're not going to be snobs about this.
No. We're watching movies we like to watch. There's going to be movies that you guys are going to be like, what?
We prefer to have movies here that you folks have also seen, but if you see us covering a movie that you've never seen, like, listen to the intro and maybe watch the movie if you'd like to, and then you can sit down and like listen to whoever is the first person watching it, like, and see if you empathize with their reactions, and then you folks can interact with us through our Twitter or through our Facebook page or whatever we have out there that you want to reach out to us, because when you watch a movie for the first time, you kind of want to talk to someone about it, and that's like the idea behind this show. So it is one of my favorite mob movies of all time, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9.0. I don't think I've ever given a movie a 10. I don't think I've ever had a movie come across as a 10 for me. And 9.5 is about as high as I've ever rated anything. So 9.0 is very, very high for me, because it's like, it's not a 100% perfect movie, and you really realize stuff like that. But it is a good movie. It's a great movie. It's fantastic, but you realize stuff like the things that you didn't realize were wrong with it when you watch it for the first time with someone. Like, when you turn to me and you're like, what happened to his family? I was like, yeah, that's a really good fucking point. Like, I really wanted to know how his dad reacted to everything that happened in his life, and you never really come back to it.
You understand that you can't show everything, because there are more important things that they need to show to further what actually happened.
Yeah, it's already a very long movie too, so I can't imagine how long.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
If they had like all these other scenes, like if they didn't montage them like having kids together and actually had scenes for that, I can't imagine how long it would be.
I just was like, when does this movie end? At the end, I was like, is this the end? Is this over now? Like, are we at the end?
She was never that vicious, but I could see it on her face that she was pretty much done with it. But yeah, so you give it an 8.5. I give it a 9. We're right around the same spot. So if you folks want to rate and review it, you can also reach out to us at our social medias and let us know what you thought of it. And it's a really good forum because I think it keeps it pretty brief and we can read some of these on future episodes. And you can also recommend movies that you'd want us to do later on. Maybe one of us has seen it, one of us hasn't. And at some point, we're going to do movies that we both haven't seen or movies that we both have seen that we really enjoyed.
That we just love.
That
like
we just want to
Constantine.
cover.
I could watch Constantine over.
Constantine is Robin's movie. So
over
I'm sure we'll cover that at some point. And we're going to have additional content. But that said, we're going to move on to the last part of the show, which is the movie history / trivia. And then we're going to do the recasting. So a movie like this is obviously going to have a ton of history to it and a ton of trivia. It's based on a true story. It was a very famous movie. It did very well. So we'll just cover some of the things that I found most interesting in this. And there's a million other things you can find on the internet, on IMDb, wherever you want to look. And you can see interviews with the cast and crew. Like, even if you talk to any of the people who are in this movie today that are still alive, like, they still have a lot to say about, like, filming this movie and how things went. But let's just jump into some of my favorite things that I found really interesting. So, first and foremost, awards. Goodfellas was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actress in the Supporting Role, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Editing, and Best Actor in a Supporting Role.
What did it win?
The only award it won was Actor in a Supporting Role, which went to Joe Pesci.
Wow.
Joe Pesci accepted his award.
Because he was cray-cray.
His speech was as follows, quote, "It's my privilege. Thank you." It's the shortest Oscar speech I have ever seen, and to a lot of people, it's widely regarded as the greatest Oscar speech of all time.
Wow.
Because it's not self-serving, it's not up its own ass, it's very brief, but you could tell it actually really did mean a lot to him that he won the Oscar for it. He beat out a lot of people. He beat out Al Pacino, who actually got nominated for Dick Tracy. He beat out Andy Garcia for Godfather 3, Bruce Davison, who was nominated for Longtime Companion, and Graham Greene, who was nominated for Dances with Wolves.
Don't know any of those.
You don't know who Al Pacino is.
I mean, I know Al Pacino. I've never seen any of those movies.
You never seen any of the Godfathers?
Nope.
So he didn't even get nominated for Godfather. You never seen Dick Tracy?
Nope.
Wow, man. We got to watch Dick Tracy. That's going to have to go on the list.
Is it a mob movie?
It's like Dick Tracy. You never heard of Dick Tracy?
No!
It's like almost like a cartoon / comic book film.
No.
So we'll watch it. It'll be fun. So now we're going to get some actual trivia about the movie. So Robert De Niro, when they were filming this movie, he wanted to use real money when he passed out money because he didn't like the way that fake money felt in his hands. So
Was it real money?
One of the prop masters gave Robert De Niro $5,000 of his own money to use throughout the film to hand out. And at the end of each take, no one was allowed to leave the set until all the money was returned and counted.
Wow.
So whoever it was that lent the money to Robert De Niro, when you see money getting passed in this movie, it is almost certainly real. If it's a scene with Robert De Niro, you can almost guarantee that it's real. So that's a bizarre thing, though. That's Robert De Niro in a nutshell, though, where it's like, I don't like the way this feels. It doesn't feel authentic.
What a pretentious dick.
So he's just very dedicated to his roles, but maybe so. There was a documentary called The Real Goodfellas that released in 2006, and Henry Hill in this claims, like the real Henry Hill, claimed that Robert De Niro would call him 7 to 8 times a day to discuss certain things about his character, which was Jimmy. It wasn't even Henry. He was playing like the other guy, and he was calling Henry Hill to ask him questions 7 to 8 times a day. He would ask him stuff like, how does he smoke his cigarette? How does he hold the ketchup bottle? The scene when they're at the dinner table, when they're hanging out with the mom, and he holds the ketchup bottle and he like rolls it down with his hands, that's supposedly exactly how that character did it.
Wow.
And he wanted to know because he wanted the authenticity to it. I remember watching that scene and almost making a note like, he rolls the bottle so weird. I wonder if that's Robert De Niro. Like, absolutely not. Like, that's something that the real life human being was actually like, that was his way of doing ketchup, which was something that was important to Robert De Niro.
Who does that?
I don't know.
Was it a square bottle or
No, it was a round bottle.
Oh.
So, according to Henry Hill, Joe Pesci's portrayal of Tommy was 90 to 99% accurate, the exception being that Tommy was actually a massively tall and built man. So, it's like, you were spot on with the personality and the behavior, you just didn't look like him. So, that's probably why he won the Oscar for it. But so originally, the role that Robert De Niro played of Jimmy Conway was offered to someone else. It was offered to Al Pacino. And Al Pacino turned down the role.
I would rather have it be De Niro than Al Pacino.
I think De Niro did it. De Niro did it perfectly.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine it as Al Pacino. What's funny is that he turned down that role because he didn't want to be typecast as a gangster too often. And he wound up playing Big Boy Caprice in Dick Tracy, which is the bad guy who is a gangster, and he was nominated for the Oscar for it after turning down the role of Jimmy Conway. What's notable is Robert De Niro didn't get nominated for this movie, but Al Pacino got nominated for Dick Tracy. So when you make a movie like this that's so intense, I think the movie studios are kind of afraid to make it. And that was definitely the case about this. When they actually showed it to like the audiences before it came out for like the preview numbers to see like how it would do, the numbers were the lowest the studio had ever received for any movie they had ever previewed. And Scorsese said, quote, "The numbers were so low, it was funny." And then the movie came out.
You're a funny guy.
That's good. The movie came out and it was just a huge success. It did well commercially. It did well critically. And it's just one of those things where, like, if you listen to focus groups sometimes, they're going to fuck up your movie. If you change your movie based off of what, like, an isolated sample says, they might be wrong.
Focus groups blow my mind because it's like, what, a group of 20 people or something? And then they're going to run the entire...
Their feedback will adjust how a movie is going to be more frequently than it should be.
And it's 20 people is not enough.
And I think they might do multiple groups of it, but it's still such a small sample based off the fact that you're going to show this thing to the entire world. So it's kind of bizarre. So that's not the only person who turned down a role during the making of this movie. Ray Liotta actually had to turn down a role in order to make Goodfellas. He was offered the role of Harvey Dent in Tim Burton's Batman in 1989, which went to Billy D. Williams, sexual chocolate himself. So he turned down that movie, and it's probably a good idea because this movie really did put him on the map. A fun thing to note that I always pay attention to, and I think a lot of people do, is the F word is used quite a bit, the F word being fuck. It's actually used 321 times during this movie, which is an average of basically 2 F words per minute, and about half of them are said by Joe Pesci and no one else. So he accounts for about half of it. And there's a list that shows you which movie has used the F word the most. When this movie first came out, it was number 1 on that list. It's now like number 12. There's 2 movies that have come out one's called Swearnet, and it's all about swearing. It's a movie all about swearing where they use it like 900 times. And there's a movie that's a documentary about the word fuck where they use it over 800 times. So I really don't think those count. Those are 1 and 2. The actual like movie that's come out that's been like not a movie about swearing that they just use it as a side product that's used the F word the most is Wolf of Wall Street, and they said it 569 times, which is a lot of F words.
I don't remember that in that movie.
You don't really remember it a lot when they just use it so much that it just becomes like a pause. Like some people use it as a verbal pause for themselves. It's used so frequently. I always like to find out like which of the children actors were related to people, because usually you figure like it's a producer's kid or an actor's kid. The little girl that was carried into the house when they went and saw Polly, that Polly like tries to give a kiss and she's too shy to give a kiss to.
Yeah,
that's Lorraine Bracco's actual daughter. And she was very shy and she didn't want to give a kiss to him. And I think she was 5, and the character she played at 5 years old was played by her older sister when she was supposed to be 10 during the movie, which I think is really cute that she had both of her kids playing the same role. An interesting thing to note about the actual testimony that took place that Henry Hill gave, it resulted in over 50 criminal convictions. So it's like, there's a reason this movie got made. Like, his testimony was explosive.
Yeah.
Like, it took down a huge portion of the mob, and this family in particular. Some last things to end on. Alec Baldwin actually auditioned for the role of Henry Hill instead of Ray Liotta and didn't get this role, which I can't imagine what the movie would have been like with Alec Baldwin instead. And Siskel and Ebert named this their favorite movie of 1990. I don't know if you're old enough like me to remember Siskel and Ebert's show. But yeah, their show was huge back in the day. Like 2 thumbs up, all that shit. Like that was like, if something didn't get 2 thumbs up, like my family was just like, ooh, I don't know if we want to see this.
Now we have like Rotten Tomatoes.
Now there's so much stuff out there, and like, you can have someone tell you that a movie's great and then see it and it's garbage. And what it really comes down to is like, form your own taste. Like, realize that some people are going to have a similar taste to you, and then like take value in their opinion and not like any random person's opinion on the internet, because things are going to get review bombed like all the effing time. So that's it for movie history and trivia. And that's about everything that we have for the movie Goodfellas. Like, I love this movie. I'm happy that I finally got to force Robin to watch it. And for those of you who have seen it before and, like, you enjoy going over it, let us know some of your favorite parts of the movie. And if you want to listen to any other podcast that we do have one more called Scary-ish. It's just a paranormal podcast where we go over creepy topics, and we also read scary stories that are sent to us by our listeners. And you can check that out wherever you can find podcasts. It's just called Scary-ish. So I think that's just about everything that we have for our pilot episode. So we hope you folks enjoyed it, and we hope to hear from you soon. And this is the part where we usually sign out with some catchphrase that we just haven't created yet. So I guess we'll say, to be continued. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
That works. Bye.